but something had changed that we both silently accepted. The intimate hand touches of the past are now just unconscious brushes when changing the TV channel. The passionate conversations have been replaced by, I have an early meeting tomorrow. He didn't do anything wrong, but you also no longer do anything that makes me feel seen, valued, and loved. I used to believe that over time, love would quietly become like cold tea. Not passionate, but gentle. But this coldness is not gentle. It silently creeps into every corner of our marriage. There are afternoons when I stand for a long time in front of the mirror, wondering, if I disappeared, would anyone in this house really notice? I have spent my entire youth for the family. I sacrificed my favorite job to stay home and take care of the children, gave up dreamy nights with friends because of the children's fevers, the times Jim came home late, the holidays when I quietly prepared everything while he just needed to be present. I don't resent it, but now, when the children have grown up, that emptiness has returned, clearer than ever. In the morning, I brewed coffee for Jim. Jim took just a sip and then focused intently on the computer. I sat across from him, wanting to say that last night I dreamed I was lost in the forest and no one found me. But I remained silent because I know he would just say, "That's strange. You sleep a little more." In the sunlight falling across the porch, I realized one thing. I am living with a good husband, but I feel suffocatingly lonely. That Tuesday morning, it drizzled lightly. I put on a light jacket, hurriedly covered myself, and drove to the Willowbrook Art Center, where I attended a few craft classes just to fill the empty time between meals. The class was empty that day. I sat at a table near the window, absent-mindedly folding strips of colored paper while my mind wandered far away. That's when I heard his voice, deep and pleasant. "Excuse me, may I sit here?" I looked up, a man in his early 50s, dressed simply, with a friendly smile. He introduced himself as Daniel, just moved to this town a few weeks ago and was advised by friends to try some craft classes to fit in. I smiled faintly and nodded. Everyone has a reason to run away from something. The strange thing is we started chatting naturally. He talked about the cross-state trips when he was young, about his mother, a woman who had to be strong after her husband left, and about how sometimes he felt that the current life was too neat to the point of being scary. I didn't share much, but I listened. And for the first time in a long time, someone is listening to me too. He didn't ask trivial questions like, "What are you cooking tonight?" or "How is the girl doing in her studies?" He asked, "Have you ever felt like you were someone else, then fell silent, waiting for an answer?" That question, so simple, made me shed tears. Well, I don't know why. Maybe because it touched the right crack in me, or perhaps because Daniel's gaze at that moment was not probing, not pitying, simply a presence, sincerely. When the class ended, he offered to give me a ride because it was still drizzling. I declined, but not out of inconvenience, but because I'm afraid that if I sit next to you a little longer, I will forget how long I've been lonely. That night, I didn't tell Jim anything. He was still engrossed in front of the computer, only looking up to say, "Don't forget to lock the door." I looked at him, nodded slightly, and then walked into the room. But my mind was still somewhere else, where a stranger had asked me something that my closest family had never asked. 3 days after that brief conversation, I ran into Daniel at the small cafe on the corner. Not by chance, nor exactly a date. I was about to order when he walked in. Our eyes met for a brief moment, but it was enough for me to feel my heart beating faster than usual. "You still like iced mocha?" he asked, his voice as light as a breeze. I burst out laughing. "Do you remember?" "Hard to forget," he said, without a smile, just the sincerity that made me feel important. We sat near the window where the gentle light streamed in. That day it wasn't raining, but it wasn't sunny either. A kind of in-between weather, very much like me. Daniel didn't ask me about my family, didn't probe about Jim, but there were questions from him that made me feel like I was opening a door that had never been opened. "Do you often think about the things you've lost? Is there something you wish you could do again, even just once?" And then came the last question, which made me choke up. "Has anyone ever truly seen you?" I was silent for a long time. The cup of coffee has completely cooled down and the palms of my hands have turned cold, but the heart is gradually warming up despite everything. That night, I got home later than usual. Jim was sitting in front of the TV, the sound of sports echoing in the living room as usual. He didn't ask me where I was going. He didn't even look up. I left my shoes by the door, walked into the kitchen, and poured myself a glass of water. In a fleeting moment, I thought about how Daniel gently touched my shoulder in farewell, a gesture that reminded me I still mattered, not just as a caregiver or partner, but as a person with inner needs and emotions. Jim walked into the kitchen, placed the beer on the table, and asked, "Have you had dinner yet?" "Okay," I replied. He nodded, opened the fridge to get more beer, then turned away as if everything was fine. But maybe that's all we have become: brief questions, disconnected nods, and nights lying apart just far enough not to touch, but close enough to call it marriage. I sat alone on the bed for a long time afterward, recalling Daniel's eyes that didn't shy away when I said I felt lonely in my own home, eyes that made me feel acknowledged, something I hadn't felt in years. So I don't know where I'm going. It's also unclear, which some moments made me question the emotional lines I thought were clear. But I know one thing: it had been a long time since someone truly listened to me. And the most dangerous thing is when you start to realize how much you crave it. I started waking up earlier, not to prepare breakfast for Jim as before, but just to sit alone on the small balcony, holding a cup of hot tea, watching the sunlight crawl through the leaves, as if learning to listen to myself again. I haven't told anyone about Daniel, not because I'm ashamed, but because I don't know what to call that relationship. Not lovers, not a friend. It is a void which he inadvertently fills with his gaze and questions that never demand an answer. On Thursday afternoon, I received a message from him: "If you still like watching the sunset by the old lake, I can drive over to pick you up." I had intended not to reply, but my fingers betrayed my troubled heart. 15 more minutes. Don't be late. When I got into the car, Daniel didn't say anything. He played soft music, adjusted the seat for me, and handed me a cold bottle of water from the storage compartment. Everything about him was moderate, not excessive, not pulling me into things I wasn't ready for, but also not pretending that there is nothing simmering between us. The lakeside that day was deserted. The wind blew cold, the water surface rippled, reflecting a gentle orange hue. We sat together without needing many words. "I know this isn't simple," Daniel said softly, his eyes fixed on the surface of the water. "I don't want you to feel like I'm intruding into your life." "But I'm doing that," I replied, my tone not accusatory, just the truth. "And the scary thing is, you don't seem angry." I looked up at him, the sunset reflected in Daniel's eyes. Those eyes had never judged me, just the presence, warm, gentle. Suddenly, a strong wind blew through. Daniel hurriedly raised his hand to shield me, placing his hand on my shoulder in an instinctive gesture. Our hands brushed briefly, a gesture that stirred something quietly within me. I don't back down. I didn't move forward either. I just sat there. The gesture reached a quiet part of me I hadn't acknowledged in years. He withdrew his hand after a few seconds, very slowly, as if respecting something more sacred than desire itself. "I'm sorry," he said softly. I shook my head. No, take apology. There were no words, just a quiet understanding. But when he drove me home that night and I got out of the car in silence, I stood in front of the door for a long time. Jim is in the study. The sound of the keyboard echoes steadily, rhythmically, like our marriage. There is sound, there is movement, but nothing resonates anymore. "Are you still awake?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah," he didn't turn back. "Where are you going?" "Stroll." To clear my mind, I lied. For the first time in over 30 years, I found myself stepping back from him, not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I know Jim won't ask further. And that silence makes me feel lonelier than anything else. That night, lying next to him, I kept my eyes open for a long time in the dark. Jim turned his back to me, breathing evenly. My hand touched the void between us, a void that no one bothered to fill. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. In my heart, a single question echoed. When trust shatters, not because of betrayal, but because of prolonged invisibility, Is what happens afterwards still called wrong? Or is it just the desire to exist once more? A week passed after the sunset by the lakeside. I haven't seen Daniel again. No messages, no phone calls. There were no hints about the next meeting either. But that absence did not diminish the distance between him and me. It made me realize that I had hoped for more than I dared to admit. I still live with Jim as usual. Breakfast is still served at 7 a.m. He still reads the newspaper on his iPad while I water the plants on the balcony. We still go to bed on time, but everything is like a play, a series of actions programmed by habit, no longer touching anyone's heart. One evening, after finishing the dishes, I walked into the bedroom and saw Jim sitting on the edge of the bed, his shirt still buttoned, holding an old wedding photo frame. "Do you see yourself disappearing?" he asked without looking at me. I was taken aback. Disappeared? Yeah, I looked up during the dinners, in those moments when you touch me and I no longer respond, in the hugs where you are the only one trying. I clenched my fists. I didn't mean to, Jim. It's just, at some point, I no longer knew if you truly saw me, or just the image of the wife you had gotten used to holding on to. He nodded slowly. "I know you're hiding something." I opened my mouth, but he raised his hand to stop me, not to interrogate. "It's just, if there's something that makes you feel alive again, maybe I want to know, even if it breaks my heart." I walked closer and sat down next to him. There is someone. Not a lover, there's nothing crossing the line, but he looks at me in a way that I haven't been looked at like that in a long time. "Daniel," Jim asked. I looked at him, surprised. "You know, I'm not blind, Claire. He drove you home last time. I saw the way you looked at him. It's not a wrong feeling, but rather the gaze of someone who has just been acknowledged for their existence." I shed tears for the first time, not out of regret, but because Jim said exactly what I couldn't bring myself to say. "Are you angry with me?" "I am angrier with myself," Jim said, his eyes reddening. "I thought stability was enough. I didn't realize how long I had let you live in silence." I held his hand for the first time after many nights. "I don't need you to become someone else, Jim. I just want you to look at me like you used to. Like the woman you once chose, not just a role beside you." Keep squeezing my hand. "Let me try again, Claire. From the beginning, not as a husband, but as the man who wants to love you once more." We hugged each other in silence, not a hug of forgiveness, but a hug to start anew. None of us know if we can start over, but at least the truth has been spoken. And that perhaps is enough to hope for. Change does not come from a night of complete love or a heartfelt apology. It comes quietly, like the way a wound gradually closes. Not loud, not demanding, but persistent. Jim didn't change immediately. He was still the quiet man, careful with his words, and often hiding his emotions behind tasks that needed to be done. But there is one difference. He has started to be more present. One morning, I woke up to find the kitchen already prepared with coffee and toast. It's not a big deal, but it's the first time in many years that I've seen him in the kitchen for me, not out of habit. I smiled, simple yet full of gratitude. When I asked, he just shrugged. "I thought you'd like a morning that doesn't start with worries." A week later, he suggested we go to the local book fair together, a place I had been going to alone since I retired. He quietly walked behind, occasionally asking, "What author are you reading?" or "Why did you choose this book?" Not polite questions. They are the clumsy yet sincere efforts of someone who wants to understand their partner again. As for me, I'm also learning to give Jim another chance. I no longer avoid his gaze when we sit down for dinner. I shared more about the thoughts in my head, the small things like why I haven't replanted the flower pot on the porch or the nameless fatigue. And I realized Jim was listening, not with judgment, but with the gentle silence of someone who truly wants to understand. As for Daniel, I didn't see him again after that day, but I wrote a short letter, sent to the old office where I used to work, just to say thank you. No promises, no explanations, just a thank you for reminding me that I am still alive, still capable of feeling, and still worthy of being understood. In the journey of healing, I learned one thing. Sometimes you don't need to destroy everything to find yourself again. Just dare to look into the growing gap between the two people, and fill it together. One afternoon, when Jim held my hand and we strolled by the lakeside, the last place I saw Daniel, I softly said, "I don't need you to change completely. I just need you to be truly present." He squeezed my hand, his gaze sincere. "And you also have to promise, if you lose yourself again, don't stay silent." I nodded. "This time I will speak. We are not perfect, but we are learning again how to be companions, not from the starting point, but from the cracks, where light can seep in. Not every marriage falls apart after moments of instability, and not everyone betrays when their heart is empty. There are those who only long to be seen, to be heard, to have someone touch the loneliness they have buried for too long." Claire's story is not about infidelity, but about the journey to rediscover connection with oneself and with a partner who seems so distant. Healing does not come from a third party, but from the courage to face the cracks that have never been named. Because sometimes starting love anew is not about beginning with someone new, but about learning to understand the old one again in a more mature version of both. If this story stirred something in you, whether shock, curiosity, or reflection, I want to hear it. What would you have done in Eliza's place? Do you believe trust can survive something so unconventional? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone else process their own. And if you want more stories that challenge the norms, dive into the messy corners of love and identity, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay with us. Every comment, every reaction helps this community grow, and your voice matters here. Let's talk.